we're ready to commence. So I'd like to say, first of all, thank you so much for coming back for the second day of formal activities. I know we've been here since last week, Friday. There were training courses that were given to techpreneurs and youth. I just want to give you a bit of statistics around the conference we're here. We had close to just under 200 students, 60 speakers, and 408 delegates. So just under 600 people have participated in Bioafrica over the last few days. I think that's I think we should give a round of applause to the organizing team. And this is on the back of bad weather that we're having in Durban, so I think you should get another round of applause for the team. We have close to 20 countries. We have 13 from the African continent. We have quite a few from what we call the global north. But South Africa outnumbers everyone. Not surprising because it's in our home country. But also we have students from across the 9 provinces in South Africa. So in terms of the discussions that I thought were really important, you know, I just want to give you a catchphrase, like if you talk about what is diversity. You know, we often talk about what is diversity. They say diversity is about having a seat at the table, inclusion is having a voice, and belonging is having that voice be heard. So what I've really learned, if I can just you know, summarize everything I've heard over the last day, is really around Bioafrica creating that voice or that opportunity for the voice of Africans or persons of color to be heard. You know, number of research programs they spend a lot of money, but they don't necessarily spend money on issues that are issues for Black communities. So, for instance, the issue around sickle cell anemia. We know that it's a debilitating disease for African Americans, but the research around that and the funding and the advocacy is not really there. And then also we talked about the role of women. I must say the afternoon workshop about women in leadership, I attended, it felt like it was I would say a hug in a workshop. And really it was women talking about their experiences as women in the biotechnology sector and really reaching out to young women in the sector around what they should be doing to move up the value chain of leadership. And then I think the organizations ensuring that we replicate success and that we ensure we have a strong global innovation ecosystem. And we know that Africa is at the center of that. We have 1.3 million persons in South Africa. And while we are only manufacturing 1% of the global vaccines, the target is, I think, by 2040 to be at 60%. And the executive of the Africa CDC gave that charge out. And I think many of those who are sitting in this room today will be part of ensuring that we can meet that target of 60% of vaccines being manufactured in South Africa by 2040. So I'm going to be part of that team. I need you to be part of that team as well. So before I go into the more enjoyable parts of the program, we're going to play a video around what happens if there's an emergency. So I'd like to ask the ICC to please play the video.
Welcome to the Durban ICC, where the world meets Africa. As a leading world-class events facility, we make your safety our #1 priority. Please give us your attention for a few minutes to take you through some important health and safety information. As the Durban ICC is a public space, please remember to keep your personal belongings safe and with you at all times. We have many bathrooms for you to use around the venue. They are clearly marked in the foyer and concourse areas. The Durban ICC is a smoke-free building, but we do have clearly marked smoking zones outside the main entrance and in the courtyards opposite the concourse. Please make use of these areas and the ashtrays provided when you smoke. In the event of a medical emergency, please dial the emergency number 031 360 1111 for assistance. The Durban ICC has developed a very simple emergency evacuation plan that everyone must be familiar with. Our staff are specially trained and will be there to assist you in following this plan. In the event of an evacuation, an announcement will be made to leave the venue. Please remain calm and walk swiftly to the nearest emergency exit in the concourse area. These exit doors are clearly marked. Security guards and the marshals will also help direct you out of the building. Please do not use any lifts or escalators in the event of an emergency. Once outside, you will be directed to the nearest assembly point by the marshals for your safety. Please wait at the assembly point until the venue has been cleared and a marshal deems it safe for you to return to your seats. Thank you for your time and enjoy this event.
So thank you so much for that informative video. So now we're going to start our program. So if you notice that, as we see on the stage, that everyone that's on the program is a woman on stage. I'll give context for that because the Minister of Science, Higher Education and Science Innovation will be dialing in from Indonesia. So today's program is really about not necessarily saying that men are not important, but really, holding up women for attention. We know that in terms of the disease burden, that many diseases like breast cancer, ovarian cancer, other challenges are really facing women, and we really wanted to just have this time for today to have these discussions. I must say that when I was talking to Dr. Masomi, who's the CEO of Africa Bio, this is actually his he was most excited about this 2.5 hours that we're having today. So I'm looking at the panel that we have, and I'm very excited myself to listen to what the wonderful woman we have today will be saying. So first I want to call for Ms. Anati Kanka. She's a representative of the TIA board, just to give some address by TIA.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for the introduction and for having us here today. I will greet the Honorable Minister, even if he's joining us through technology. The DG, I greet you. Fellow speakers on the panel. Special mention of Dr. Mlambo Ngcuka. I remember when you were our Deputy Minister at DST a long time ago. All stakeholders and all dignitaries and everyone. I begin by expressing our gratitude for the opportunity for TIA to partner and journey together with all the stakeholders along this path to a prosperous South Africa and African continent. We have, as this country, long recognized the potential and the value of technological innovation in our development, economically and socially. As we meet here again to explore specifically how the resilience of this continent could be enhanced to achieve health and food security through innovation in the life sciences, it is perhaps useful that we reflect on the role of the Technology Innovation Agency in supporting and implementing the bioeconomy strategy led by the Department of Science and Innovation. TIA has developed a strategic plan that seeks to intensify the translation and commercialization of IP from the country's science councils, small and medium enterprises, and higher education institutions, and also increase the access that entrepreneurs and innovators have to technology infrastructure services that provides them with much needed support, all with the goal of scaling up our effort to implement this strategy. It is crucial, I think, particularly in this year when we're talking about health and food security, to focus our minds to a great extent to the marginalized people in rural areas and peri-urban areas. Marginalized, especially when it comes to benefiting from our public investment in science and technology. How are they found by the people who are leading the knowledge production and innovation efforts? Who finds them? Who consults them? How can we speak of inclusive innovation if we do not hear their voice, if we do not create spaces in which their voices can be heard? I believe that although much work has to be done to catch up and excel in the innovation space, we now need to pay serious attention to target potential beneficiaries of innovation in these areas. Entrepreneurs and job creators in parts of the country that need it the most. This is made even more pertinent by the fact that the potential beneficiaries of technological innovation, the women, are mostly found in these settings. In formulating work and in funding and supporting scientists and entrepreneurs at any point in the innovation cycle, the profile of the beneficiaries of potential innovations have to be taken into account. Perhaps with the question, how will women benefit from this innovation? And perhaps another, how will this innovation reach women in rural areas? TIA has provided support to a few of these types of initiatives, some of which are being exhibited here. The alloferox work led by the CSIR is an example of work that benefits and uplifts women in the small town of Simo in the Eastern Cape through the use and exploitation of natural resources, through the provision of training and technical services, and this has led to the establishment of a women-owned enterprise in cosmetics. This project, funded by TIA with partners, of course, is a result of interactions at a previous BioAfrica convention, actually, I am told, by Pat Nzotoi, who is the leader of this project. In general, although we have made some investment and achieved support in this area, we have to pause and ask ourselves about scale. How do we bring in more people into the ecosystem? And perhaps the question should be, how do we attract more people? How do we ensure that the people we want to serve, the people the public investment is intended to assist and create opportunities for, get to know about us? Because looking at this year's theme specifically, we need to widen the catchment area, so to speak, to bring in the people who know more about our natural resources and their benefits than anyone else. When we speak of indigenous knowledge, agriculture, and juxtapose these with health and food security, the opportunities for discovery and for addressing the basic need for food and for food security are vast. How do we create an ecosystem of supporting functionaries to ensure that the CSIR example, when it exits that alloferox project that I mentioned in Simo, the next layer of needed support is available to that enterprise? Perhaps we need to bring closer and in meaningful and effective ways the traditional leaders, traditional healers, and the local government system especially. And I know that the DSI has programs in this regard. However, we're talking about scale. We're talking about collaborators. We're talking about partners. Perhaps we need to see how we widen the circle, as they say, through awareness programs that attract people to us, rather than among, for example, the local government system, leading to projects supported at the beginning in the circle from the user and beneficiary side. We again need to redouble our efforts at creating a conducive environment for women scientists to thrive. We need to figure out what needs to be done to attract young people into science careers and to keep them there. And the keeping aspect is the most important, I think. As greater numbers of young Black women, for example, are now holders of PhDs, or at least aspire to this attainment more than maybe 10 or 15 years ago, when I was more involved in this area. The question is what needs to be provided in terms of a supportive environment to ensure that they remain in the knowledge-producing end of the innovation cycle. What do we know of the challenges women scientists face in the workplace that, if they were to be addressed and removed, would lead to even more breakthrough outputs at the knowledge-producing end and at the exploitation end, again, for the benefit of citizens and the attainment of the development goals of the country and all of Africa. As a system, perhaps, it is time for a dialogue of women in science, a summit, perhaps, to start the conversations that are necessary in this regard. We need to be doing more, employing creative ways to bring in more women living with disabilities, more Black women into this ecosystem at all points and at all levels, not just at the knowledge-producing end, as I mentioned earlier, but throughout as entrepreneurs, managers of science and innovation, and leaders of key institutions and enterprises. Again, I must say, the gains have been made if comparisons are made with 10 years ago, but this is not the time to rest. Then, talking about the innovation capacity of South Africa, much was said here yesterday already by some speakers about the unique position we're in and how the excellent contributions of our scientists and institutions through the exploitation of registered IP have been used to the benefit of not only the country but everywhere, particularly when we're talking about the pandemic. Our potential in South Africa, though, to benefit from the broad spectrum of research outputs is vast, as I believe we have much to mine from, for example, plant breeders' rights, and a form of IP not often mentioned in this system, and yet we have a considerable portfolio. If we can imagine or reimagine our commercialization strategies in this area, and here I speak of modalities of commercialization that are inclusive in all respects, with license-free arrangements, for example, for some of the IP given to farmer entrepreneurs in the small-scale agriculture sector. The exploitation of the varieties that have been protected in the manner of plant breeders' rights should be the answer to food security issues in large parts of the country and perhaps even the continent. We need to reimagine a more strategic approach to the management and exploitation of plant breeders' rights, and not just those that have huge commercial potential, but also from a point of view of potential to address food security. At TIA, we continue to play a key role in the system, working towards the development of our country and our continent through technological innovation. We continue to seek partnerships and collaborations. We believe that TIA's time is now, as we are poised to have more impact in the system and the development of the country. Thank you very much for your attention.
No, thank you so much, Ms. Klanka, for that great words of encouragement. But also notice that even while we're here speaking about women, she brought up the issue of disabilities. And that's often part of the discussion that never happens. So I really appreciate the fact that you went broader and ensured that persons with disabilities were also included in the discussion. I'm going to now give an introduction to our minister, the Honorable Bongikosi Emmanuel Blade Nzimande. He was born in 1958 in Edendale, near Pietermaritzburg in South Africa. He's a South African politician, sociologist, philosopher, educator. He's currently the Minister of Science and Minister of Higher Education and Science and Technology. Previously, he was the Minister of Transport from 2018 to 2019. He was a Minister of Higher Education and Training from 2009 to 2017. He was the General Secretary of the South African Communist Party since 1998 until recently. He is now the national chairperson of the 8th national chairperson of the South African Communist Party. Now, I know you're probably wondering, this is an all-women's panel. Now the Minister of Science and Technology, Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation is now included. I'll tell you why we're including him on this panel. A few years ago, when you talk about there was the issues of Black Lives Matter, and the Me Too movement was really moving globally. And really at that point in time, the discussion around allies really came to the fore. We knew that in most cases that women or even Blacks were marginalized, and really, it was not really the responsibility of Blacks and women to push things forward. It's really for people of power or people of influence to really assist marginalized communities or help them advance. And this is why we're bringing the minister in today. So he's not a woman, but we think he's an ally of women. And I'll tell you what that means. So an ally is a person who takes responsibility for their own behaviors around and educates others towards the importance of bringing privilege to others, but also this person is around sponsoring women and persons of color to insist on diverse hiring pools and practices, but also they vigilantly watch out for the bias at work and intervene decisively if they discover it happening. So, our minister often, when we are in M meetings, talks about issues of gender-based violence and how we need to arrest this issue, not just as women, but as men. So this is why the minister, he is a man, but he is an ally of women, and why he is included in today's panel. So, Minister, I hope you're online and you can dial in.
Yes, I'm online, Rebecca. I hope you can hear me. Let me start by greeting you, Program Director, Dr. Rebecca Maseromule. Let me also greet Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, former Executive Director of UN Women and former Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa. Dr. Philip Mjwara, the Director General of our Department of Science and Innovation. Dr. Michelle McMary Heath, CEO of Bioeconomy. Dr. Lawrence Banks, CEO of International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology. Ms. Anati Khansa, representative from the Technology Innovation Agency Board. Mr. Patrick Krapi, acting CEO for Technology Innovation Agency. Dr. Nhlanhla Msomi, CEO of Africa BioVio. Mr. Parasi, the CEO of Innovative Pharmaceutical Association of South Africa. Dr. Ahmed Omar, the Director of the African Center for Disease Control. Professor Zodwa Dlamini, Founding Director and Executive Head of Pan-African Cancer Research Institute. Dr. Watuwa Maya, Research Engagement Manager at Africa Oxford Initiative. Distinguished guests and participants, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Let me take this opportunity to greet you all. And also, it is indeed a great honor and privilege for me to address this 5th BioAfrica Convention 2022, held at our sunny city, Durban. I hope those who are attending the convention physically are also enjoying the scenery that the city can offer, especially during this season. This convention is held in a month in which South Africa has been celebrating Women's Month, a month which provides an opportunity to pay tribute to a generation of South African women whose struggles laid the foundations for the progress made in empowering women and in advancing gender equality to date. Indeed, Dr. Maseromule, I often describe myself as a gender activist because the struggle for women's emancipation and gender equality is a struggle for both women and men. And unless and until we mobilize not only women, but boys and young men in particular, we won't win this battle. Because as some of you may be aware, both the 2020 and 2021 BioAfrica conventions were virtual as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite this, the 2021 convention attracted a staggering 1,308 attendees from at least 39 countries. This, in fact, also underscores, in a way, the importance of this fifth convention, held under the theme, Africa Resilient, Life Sciences Innovation for Achieving Health and Food Security. The organizers of this year's convention could not have chosen a more apt theme, intended to inspire Africa's policymakers, scientists, and social actors to steer our continent away from being only a knowledge-consuming region, but turning it into a self-reliant, knowledge-generating and innovating continent. As a country, the objectives of this convention perfectly aligns with our 2019 white paper on science, technology, and innovation, as well as our science, technology, and innovation decadal plan, 2021 to 2031, whose key objectives include accelerating the implementation of the Pan-African Science, Technology, and Innovation Agenda, and focusing on inclusivity, transformation, gender equality in the STI environment, SMME support, and job creation, amongst others. The decadal plan is premised on advancing a whole of government approach and ultimately a whole of society approach to innovation in South Africa. We've begun with our work to establish a standing ministerial level Science, Technology, and Innovation Committee, which involved key ministries in our government, and I've been assigned by the President to chair this interministerial committee. And our President, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, will be hosting an annual Science, Technology, Innovation Plenary, which will include business, government, academia, and civil society. I must indicate that our goal is to ensure a just transition in both our traditional economic sectors like mining, as well as to lay the foundation for the emergence of new economic sectors, including in the important spheres that we are discussing about this time around, that of biodiversity and, of course, the digital economy as well. To come close to achieving the overarching objective of this convention, as articulated in this conference theme, there are several things that I believe we must focus on. As we collectively responded to the COVID-19 pandemic, Africa also must deal with the wider set of crises, which are global in nature, but have a specific manifestation and impact on our continent, which is that of social inequality, the challenge of social inequality, the crisis brought about by climate change, technological disruptions, and linked to all the above, a crisis of the global capitalist system, including what one may call the crisis of social reproduction. In other words, the difficulties that many families and households in our continent are struggling to make ends meet. These are the crises that we need to be responding to as the continent. In fact, we cannot speak of a sustainable, let alone equal society, unless and until we fundamentally change the nature of the global economic and social order. Now, on the importance of the bioeconomy, firstly, this is amongst the reasons for African policymakers, scientists, and other social actors that they need to urgently understand and embrace the importance of the bioeconomy for Africa's socio-economic development and sustainability. Across the world, the concept of a bioeconomy is being embraced as a sustainable model that brings together all commercial activity surrounding the use of renewable biological resources, such as crops, forests, animals, and microorganisms, agricultural waste, and residual materials. We need not overemphasize that women in fact, are very central in the management of these resources. This is being done with a view to address challenges related to food security, health, biodiversity, and environmental protection, energy and industrial processes. It is therefore no exaggeration to state that the very survival of humanity is dependent on how we manage the Earth's resources. The second important challenge that I hope also you will be grappling with relates to inequality on our continent. According to Oxfam, and I quote, Africa is the second most unequal continent in the world and is home to 7 of the most unequal countries. The richest 0.0001% of the population own 40% of the wealth of the entire continent. Africa's 3 richest billionaire men have more wealth than the bottom 50% of the population of Africa, which is approximately 650 million people, unquote. As policymakers, scientists, and social actors must take well-thought, collaborative, and decisive action on how to turn Africa into an innovative and self-reliant continent, as enjoined by the theme of this convention. And indeed, we will not be able to deal with these challenges facing the continent unless women are at the center of this agenda. To our advantage, we have an incredibly rich biodiversity and a relatively large proportion of arable land. All this puts us in a favorable position to translate our biodiversity into a viable, competitive, and sustainable bioeconomy. We are therefore duty-bound to use our biodiversity and arable land to take Africa and her people out of the trap of grinding and debilitating poverty. An important matter that I would urge you also to reflect upon, which is increasingly preoccupying myself personally as Minister of Science in South Africa and my department, is that of the absolute necessity to identify and mobilize sources to fund research, development, and innovation in Africa in line with the priorities and challenges facing our continent. For me, this is one of the most important challenges facing us. We cannot, for instance, be able to advance most of our research, science, technology, and innovation goals unless we have our own funding resources to fund research so that we are less dependent on donor-driven funding. The third issue that we must focus on is to encourage and support more African countries to not just embrace the importance of the bioeconomy, but for them to proactively build the necessary policy, institutional, and scientific capacity to build a viable bioeconomy in Africa. And this is, of course, linked to the fundamental task that I've just outlined of a research funding regime for the continent that is based on advancing the African agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, for instance, the question that we also need to ask, if the African Union has adopted what is called Agenda 2063, we in the science community need to ask the question, what should be the scientific agenda of the AU Agenda 2063 that will enable that agenda to be realized? Because without science, technology, and innovation, we are not going to realize the goals of that agenda. And without increasingly independent sources of funding to fund research for an African agenda, we are not going to even achieve Agenda 2063. I hope that you will grapple with this because this is an important platform for that. The task is particularly urgent if we consider the observations by the United Nations on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on food security. The UN states that, and I quote, in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, world hunger increased substantially. Estimates from the state of food security and nutrition around the world revealed that as many as 161 million people fell into hunger between 2019 and 2020, bringing the world's total to 811 million people facing food insufficiency. In other words, about 1 in 10 people in the world went to bed without enough nutrition in the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is indeed very serious. Unquote. The UN further observes that, I quote again, Africa has been particularly vulnerable. About 21% of people on the continent suffered from hunger in 2020, a total of 282 million people. Between 2019 and 2020, in the aftermath of the pandemic, 46 million people became hungry in Africa. No other region of the world presents a higher share of its population suffering from food insecurity, unquote. In this respect, therefore, ladies and gentlemen and program director, whilst to recognize the work that is done by South Africa, but as a continent, we must commend the work that is being done by other African countries such as Namibia, Uganda, Ghana, and Kenya, that have implemented several policy and institutional measures to promote the sustainable management and use of their biodiversity. Those African countries that are yet to implement these measures can learn from the experiences of these countries. Some of the things to learn include the following: the importance of identifying gateway sectors through which to initiate the development of transition to a bioeconomy, strengthening links to research and development and markets for new bioproducts and biosolutions, developing demand for bioproducts and biosolutions, regulating sustainability incentives and managing trade-offs, as well as setting up independent national advisory boards to inform and guide the development of bioeconomies. Indeed, we need to share on these as a continent. The fourth issue that is of importance relates to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on livelihoods. A 2021 study by Kenya's Daystar University reveals that, and I quote, the negative effect of COVID-19 to the world economy is estimated to be $12 trillion by 2021. During the same period, over 400 million full-time jobs were lost globally by the second quarter of 2020. In Africa, the pandemic led to a negative growth of minus 5.1% by 2020, thereby plunging the continent into the worst recession in 25 years. The study further states that, and I quote, for small and medium enterprises, which employs between 70% and 90% of the population, the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic has been even more severe, with 87% of business owners uncertain about the future of their businesses. The biggest challenges to business survival were associated with inadequate financing support, uncertainty, lack of government support, and numerous measures meant to curb COVID-19, such as lockdown, unquote. In terms of the lessons learned from COVID-19, my Department of Science and Innovation coordinated a package of responses across the National System of Innovation to address South Africa's readiness for the impact of COVID-19. The response has been centered on 4 pillars. 1, analytics and modeling. 2, research and innovation. 3, manufacturing. 4, international cooperation initiatives in support of the global responses to the pandemic. As South Africa, we allocated substantial financial resources to fund COVID-19 projects, including epidemiological studies and genomic surveillance that placed South African scientists on the international map, working with other countries to find solutions to the pandemic. For instance, the KwaZulu-Natal Research Innovation and Sequencing Platform, based in the very city that we are holding this convention, identified the coronavirus beta variant. This platform, which we call CRISP in short, did genome sequencing, and this demonstrated South Africa's leadership in this area on a world stage and contributed to the understanding of emerging variant efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines. This work informed government decision-making on which vaccines to procure, with genomic surveillance becoming a critical component of a targeted response to the epidemic throughout the country. CRISP research has been used to inform the planning and responses of other countries as well. As South Africa, we also developed our own diagnostics and reagents needed to diagnose COVID-19 cases. The awarding of the Global mRNA Technology Transfer Hub to South Africa is also an acknowledgement of the abilities of South African scientists. My Department of Science and Innovation's African Natural Medicines platform worked closely with the World Health Organization Regional Office for Africa through its Advisory and Expert Committee on African Medicines, and they visited South Africa to monitor the country's capability in terms of research, innovation, manufacturing, and clinical utilization of African natural medicines, a subject that I hope also will feature prominently in your deliberations. Supported by the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the African Union Commission, and the European and Developing Countries Clinical Trials Partnerships, the World Health Organization, AFRO, affirms that South Africa is best placed to provide continental leadership in research and manufacturing of these health products as part of the continent, which we are. Ladies and gentlemen, and Program Director, with regards to food security resilience, some of the lessons we learned in relation to agriculture as South Africa were in nutrition security, supply chains, and digital agricultural systems. Collaborative work among government departments, the business sector, and active involvement of communities and SMMEs demonstrated the importance of inclusivity for a resilient food and nutrition sector. South Africa is promoting the inclusion of all forms of food products, especially underutilized indigenous crops, which are readily available across the continent. It must also be remembered as we meet today that the AU declared this year, 2022, as the year of nutrition. There has been increased efforts and commitments to prioritize and invest in nutrition at the continental level. Therefore, upholding the cultural heritage and practices of Africans includes the consumption of stable and indigenous African foods, given their nutritional value and potential to contribute towards food security and health of the African population. Through its indigenous knowledge-based nutraceutical platform and the Agricultural Biotechnology Innovation Program, the Department of Science and Innovation in South Africa has supported various communities and small and medium enterprises with technologies that added value to their crops and products across provinces. Some of our flagship programs are in soya, maize, moringa, bambara nuts, amadumbe, cowpea, numerous green leafy vegetables, and health infusions. In order for Africa to be resilient, especially in cases of disasters and pandemics, it is absolutely essential to deliberately foster an interface of indigenous knowledge and modernization through digitization. This is a huge and important area with such potential for research as part of addressing African problems and as part of the African agenda of science, technology, and innovation. Working with the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform, and Rural Development in South Africa, we co-launched what we named the National Biosecurity Research Hub later this year. This hub will prioritize both the generation of digital scientific information hubs, coupled with development of digitization platforms to support disease management, surveillance, and monitoring for both domestic and international trade. These models are being shared with other African countries and will contribute a great deal to continental resilience against natural pandemics and wars. Of course, we do hope that, as Africa says, that at some stage, sooner rather than later, we'll have to silence the guns, which is a very important component and precondition for developing and realizing the full potential of our continent. Informed by all of this, it is extremely important that this convention comes up with concrete policy actions that must be undertaken by African governments in particular to enable small businesses, especially in the indigenous knowledge system sector, to recover from the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. This will give these businesses an opportunity to increase their output and gain easy access and to local and international markets. Program Director, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, South Africa views this fifth convention also as a very important part of the response, as I have said, to the African Union's Agenda 2063, which is the continent's strategic framework that aims to deliver on its goal for inclusive and sustainable development. It is therefore my sincere hope that this convention will make a significant contribution to the development of sustainable solutions that African governments can adopt with a view to addressing some of the main problems facing our continent, such as food insecurity, climate change, and health innovation, and continue to promote the importance of cooperation between African governments and other sectors of society. For example, we now have the historic African trade agreement covering the whole continent. The question is, what is the science, technology, and innovation agenda to actually promote this agreement on open trade in our continent? With these words, I wish you a productive convention and look forward to the outcome of this very, very important gathering. I thank you.
No, thank you, Minister, for your words of encouragement, but also for giving us a focus. You're saying, the global crisis has a slightly different impact on Africa, so we need to have our own voice and views around how we should respond. But also, what's the role of science and innovation in responding to the Africa Agenda 2063? If we look at the difference between responding and reacting, when COVID was upon us, we reacted the best we could. People were dying. We didn't really know what was going on. It took us probably quite a few weeks or months to really figure out what was going on, analyze, and then push forward with a solution. But what we have right now is we have an opportunity to respond. So if you think about responding, it's really a spin-off from the word responsibility, which talks about being considerate and deliberate about your actions, versus reacting is around, literally means just taking one action against another. The difference between responding and reacting is that responding takes into consideration your desired outcome, and then the minister's speech, he's given us a view as what the outcomes we should be looking towards around the issues of inclusivity, a specific plea for SMEs in the IKS sector, ensuring they can get up and running. But also, I think where reacting is around getting a positive or negative outcome you don't know, responding is ensuring that you engineer the desired outcome that you want to see. So I think today's discussions, as well as yesterday's, is really around ensuring that the biotechnology sector will respond to the challenges for the future. So thank you so much, Minister, for your words of encouragement. So now we have the next speaker in our agenda. We have Professor Zara Pindella, the founding director and executive head of the Pan-African Cancer Research Institute, coming forward. Please, thank you so much. Round of applause.
Thank you, Program Director, and DDG for Science and Innovation, former Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, the Minister of Higher Education and Training, Dr. Blade Nzimande, the DG for Science and Innovation, Dr. Philemon Jwaha, all protocol observed. I'm here today to advocate for science that I believe in. As the DG said yesterday, you must advocate for the science that you do. The title of today is PACRI, which means the Pan-African Cancer Research Institute. PACRI, transforming the fight against cancer in Africa, from cancer control and prevention to novel therapeutics for improved health outcome. So I think it's really a topic that will resonate with many innovators here. So I'm the founding director and the executive head for the Pan-African Cancer Research Institute. I started it from scratch when I found they had just asked me to come in and start a program on cancer. So I thought, let me start something big. So, which I think I did. I'm also the SACHI chair for the Department of Science and Innovation, NRF, on precision oncology and cancer prevention. Also, I'm the director for the South African Medical Research Council Precision Oncology Research Unit. I put them here, these science council, which actually fund, they sort of form the basis for the Pan-African Cancer Research Institute. So they give, they sort of contribute funding towards the realization of this institute. Of course, more is needed. Let's talk about non-communicable diseases. What should we know? The World Health Organization estimates that deaths from non-communicable diseases in the African region will increase to about 30% by 2020. And that means 28 million additional deaths. That will exceed deaths due to communicable, which is infectious diseases, maternal, perinatal, and nutritional diseases combined. In some African countries, for instance, the NCDs cause over 50% of all adult deaths. This implies that non-communicable diseases will soon be a leading cause of ill health, disability, and premature death in the African region. So cancer is one of the leading NCDs on the African region. So maybe you might ask yourself, and then, why then is there so much investment into infectious diseases? And the non-communicable diseases are just, I don't want to say no one cares about it. There are investment coming, but very slowly. So what is the rationale? What is the idea behind? What is the importance of the Pan-African Cancer Research Institute? So cancer rates continue to increase worldwide, making it now the second leading cause of death globally. That is after heart disease. Of course, it's not infectious diseases, after heart disease. And with approximately 70% of cancer deaths occurring in low middle income countries. And it is emerging as a public health problem in the sub-Saharan Africa. Why is this? Why do we have higher death rates in LMICs or sub-Saharan Africa? The mortality rates in Africa are high because cancers are detected much later when treatment is ineffective, when there is no hope actually, or less effective, because in Africa we just get treatment. No one knows whether it's gonna work or not, unlike in the first world country where you are treated with a drug where they know that you're gonna respond to it. And when you don't respond, they know even beforehand that now you're starting to become resistant to the drug, so they change it. But here it doesn't happen, so you just die. Or when the drugs are unaffordable because they are so expensive, cancer drugs, hopefully in the years to come, it will be like, it will be cheaper, like getting drugs for HIV. So PACRI aims to contribute to improve health outcomes, capacity building for early detection, and precision or personalized or targeted oncology, and strengthen health systems in the African region. It's never been done before. We are trying to chart the way forward. Yeah, the vision is very long, but it's loaded, but very important. So PACRI aims to be a world-class Pan-African Cancer Research Institute dedicated to pushing the boundaries of precision oncology or targeted oncology, cancer prevention, and bringing new approaches for early diagnosis and novel therapeutic agents to improve health outcomes, reduce health inequalities, strengthen health systems in underserved and socio-economically disadvantaged communities. Remember, even when I traveled the world, I asked, in terms of clinical trials, blacks are not represented. They are in my minority, even overseas. It's even worse here. No clinical trials, no screening. This is a busy slide, but I know when Dr. Msomi give it away to the investors to invest in PACRI, they will have all the information there. So PACRI already have a strategic plan, and it's almost 2 years. PACRI is not old, but it has done a lot under my leadership. So PACRI is based on 5 pillars. The first one being of developing improved tools and new technologies for early detection, treatment, and prevention of cancer, as well as advancing precision oncology in the African region. The second one being building a critical mass of cancer researchers in the African region, because that is important for us to be able to fight cancer. We need a critical mass of researchers in the African region. I was very happy to hear the ministers talking about investment. We really need more investment into non-communicable diseases. It's quite costly to do this kind of research, and we need to develop researchers, and it's quite costly also to build capacity in this area. I remember, I want to make an example. Yesterday I met one student. He just submitted PhD at SMU and said I was teaching her at University of Limpopo, because I've worked in many universities, big or small. So she said, I want to join you. I said, yeah, you really, I would take you, but I still have to look for funding. I mustn't have a problem of funds in order to develop capacity. So these researchers, which we must be able to develop international competitive cancer research capabilities in Africa with the emphasis on Afrocentric solutions, enhancing the probability of finding homegrown solutions for cancer challenges faced by the continent. We are quite different. Our genetics is quite different from other nations. So we have to take charge of our research in order for it to thrive. Remember, for infectious diseases, we also have great researchers here, so we have to also emulate those researchers and do our best. So the pillar 3 is collaboratively promote in-house innovation, new business models or spin-out companies, and partnerships to ignite change and deliver value to society. So as I'm presenting today, I'm hoping innovators are listening and they will take these opportunities and partner with PACRI. Pillar 4 is building a strong drive in collaborative transdisciplinary research that addresses cancer health disparities and its impact on underserved and socioeconomic disadvantaged population. I think I've explained that because of also our genetic background, because also we don't get opportunities to be included in clinical trials and new drugs be tested on us. So that we want to address as well. Pillar 5, improving PACRI's local and international partnerships to connect and cooperate in the field of cancer research and becoming a privileged scientific forum for cutting-edge cancer research and a cancer center of excellence. This can happen. We already have a lot of international collaborations or partners and local partners, and cancer research, cutting-edge cancer research happens elsewhere, that is in the first world countries. But the first world countries are very keen to come and work with us. So, but we need to have that, we can't rely 100% on their funding. Well, they do also try by all means, but we need to get funded from home as well. So PACRI is of importance also. PACRI aligns with various national plans, the first important one being the National Bioeconomy Strategy. I think we all hear about that. Some few, the 10-year innovation plan, the South Africa's Research and Development Strategy, the National Development Plan, the Science, Technology and Innovation Strategy for Africa 2024, the Department of Science and Innovation Decadal Plan, the South African Research Infrastructure Roadmap. You need a lot of infrastructure for this kind of research, and it's quite costly. And what are the societal and economic or socio-economic benefit or impact? So here we look at the SDGs. This kind of research also impacts on SDG 3, which is good health and well-being, that is accelerating discoveries and focused on developing new and better approaches to prevent, diagnose and treat cancer and advance precision or personalized oncology, incorporating artificial intelligence, including health, building health human resources. SDG 4, which is quality education, that is building a critical mass of cancer researchers in Africa by developing internationally competitive cancer research capabilities with emphasis on enhancing the probability of finding homegrown solutions for cancer challenges. SDG 5, very, very important, gender equality. Promoting gender equality by enhancing efforts of increasing participation of women scientists in cancer research agenda. I think here it's quite important also to understand that in this kind of science, there is men, and especially white, but they are willing to even mentor women. So, but you can't force anyone unless if you put funding on the table, because some people also, they are not well funded. So even if they wish, they won't. So it's important. Actually, we should have awards where we award men who mentor women, because otherwise we'll go nowhere. SDG 9, Industry, Innovation and Infrastructure. It's building R&D capabilities on innovative, preventive, diagnostic, treatment solutions, which are crucial drivers for inclusive economic growth and development as per the African Union's Agenda 2063 and the UN 2030 Agenda. SDG 4, reduced inequalities, creating a strong drive in collaborative transdisciplinary research, addressing cancer health disparities to improve health outcomes of underserved and socioeconomically disadvantaged communities, which are disproportionately impacted by health disparities. SDG 17 is the last one, which is partnerships for the goals, enhancing local and international partners and becoming a privileged scientific forum for cutting edge and channeling resources and promoting synergies in the cancer research sector between various national and international partners. There are 3 macro areas, very broad. Under PACRI, we cover almost the whole scope, the clinical cancer research, translational cancer research, population and prevention cancer research. This is the PACRI launch, which happened earlier this year, and you can see the president for Africa Bio there, so it's very supportive. Please keep on supporting PACRI, Dr. Msomi. I acknowledge the funders for PACRI, and these are the where you can get us. Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much, Professor Zadwa. I think the work that you do is so important. I mean, so many of us probably know women who've died of cancer. I mean, my godmother and favorite aunt died a couple years ago. My other aunt, she survived 2 bouts of breast cancer. But without talented researchers who are pushing this agenda, we're not going to live the way we need to. So thank you so much for the work. It's so important, and I really can't emphasize the importance of funding these issues and initiatives. And we have our next speaker, Dr. Watu Wamai. He's a Research Engagement Manager at Africa Oxford Initiative. Please come forward.
Honorable ministers, distinguished guests, all protocols observed, it's a real pleasure to be here this morning to share a few of my thoughts with you. And one of the advantages of coming at the tail end of the presentation is that others will have said most of what you need to say, so it makes your work really easy. So I think we're going to literally just fly through my presentation. So just to take a step back for a minute and think about why we are talking so passionately about biosciences and innovation, it's very much about shaping technological trajectories as well as benefiting from them. So we just had a minute ago that it's about shaping the science we are doing to speak directly to the problems that concern us. Now, we are very familiar with some of these megatrends that I've put up here. We know that Africa has a very fast-growing population that's young and projected to be over 3 billion by 2050. In other parts of the world, they talk about different demographic dynamics. We're talking about aging populations. So not too far in the distant future, we'll have quite a lot of people in other parts of the world in care homes, and the place of the world of work will be mostly African. So Africans supporting economies, fixing the problems we talk about of sustainability and climate change and so on and so forth. So there is a bigger agenda beyond the continent, even if the continent still needs much more to be done. And then, of course, we have a youthful and aspirational demographic, And we have increasingly people who are trained in basic sciences and are able to work at the world-class level of their science and play a very high game. And then, of course, we have urbanization becoming increasingly more common, and that requiring different resources and setting up of urban areas. Now, the other three things I'm going to mention here very quickly, and by no chance is this exhaustive, is the fact that we are seeing an epidemiological transition, as was mentioned by Professor Lamy. So I won't go into much detail about that, but it's something that is important to notice and to bear in mind. Much as we're expecting many more pandemics and so on and so forth, we are very much talking about a transition that is very much about NCDs. And again, the Honorable Minister earlier on says we have to think about how we are going to fund science, research, and innovation. And the funding is increasingly going to have to come from within Africa. We saw what happened a few years ago where, for example, the UK reduced the budget of funding when there was a pandemic. Now we have a war, and other countries are facing other challenges, and donors are less able to engage with the situation we want to deal with in Africa. So it's very much about buckling down and thinking about how we are going to get our own resources, do the type of science and innovation we want for our continent. And then finally, and we'll talk much more about the new technologies, this is very much about an opportunity for transforming health delivery. And moving on, so this is a bit, the statistics here are a bit dated, but I thought it's poignant to put that up, and we had much more precise information from the previous presenter. But as you can see, the probability of dying prematurely from non-communicable diseases is very much a question or an issue to think about when we're talking about Africa for the reasons that were raised. And even if we are sort of in this situation where we are thinking much more about pandemics, we must not forget that this is what is actually happening as well. Now, I'll delve into what is more of my comfort zone because I'm an economist. I have a background in economics of innovation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the macro perspective of why we are doing what we are doing when we talk about science and innovation. So, of course, research is key because this is how you come up with new technologies or new ways of doing things. And then, of course, it's very much about converting all that into something that has impact to society and create societal transformation. And, I've just mentioned a few megatrends: demographics, technology, health, but there are other things to be thinking about. So increasingly, we are talking about sustainability because of climate change, and, of course, there's geopolitics, and we can go on. And here, I would like to sort of emphasize on the question of relationships, and we may call that collaborations or networks. And we know that connecting research to industry is something we have to really engage with. I was in a presentation yesterday, and there was a PhD candidate from UCT who had a very important question, because she said that you do all the research, you come up with a proof of concept, then it dies in the lab. And then similarly, we had another panel where there was someone from the Technology Transfer Office who was saying, increasingly, good science is not the problem. The problem is how do you turn that into impact? So it's really understanding how we connect research to industry. And we know there's a valley of death, and we'll be saying a little bit more about that and how to engage with it. But the first thing to think about really is what is actually going on currently in the landscape in terms of the interactions between universities and research networks. And this is critical because, as George said again in a different panel, so this is George Painter, who has worked a lot in industry and then also in university. and was saying when he went back to work in university, it's almost as though he needed a social anthropologist to be able to sort of bring the conversations together and make sense. Because sometimes languages can be different and stand in the way, and how people sort of conceptualize how they're going to move to the next thing can be very different. But here I'm preaching to the choir. So, maybe the scientists are talking more about doing good and publishing papers and also wanting to have impact. But then you'll find that industry, they're coming at it with a different language and talking about bottom lines and other things and so on. So it's really to get that conversation and that relationship working in a way that serves our continent. And then, of course, what that does, it broadens the scope for understanding innovation and sustainable futures. And here, I'm going to focus for a minute on applied sciences and interdisciplinary networks, not because social sciences and humanities don't matter, but we'll see why. And we had yesterday there was a conversation that was about manufacturing in Africa, which is very important because we have to bring in manufacturing, we have to bring in industry. But what we need is actually a two-pronged approach. Do the manufacturing, set up factories, whether they're engaging in assembly work or much more than that and so on. But the capabilities needed there to do that work are very different from what is missing from this diagram. So there's a missing bubble there, and that's where we mostly fall down and that we have to think critically about. So what typically happens, we have basic science happening, attempts to move into proof of concept and then commercialize that research. And then because of that missing bubble, this conversation between industry and academia doesn't work smoothly. And that bubble is about capabilities that are very, very important and also very difficult to create, but nonetheless very important. And I'll say very briefly, at Oxford, as you know, there was Sarah Gilbert who invented the COVID vaccine, the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine. And there's a manufacturing plant there, so they were able to go within the university, they were able to go some way in terms of creating vaccines for clinical trials, which I participated in, but they could not go beyond that because basically what Sarah Gilbert had, as you would know, is a recipe that would do what it was supposed to do. But to move from that recipe and take it and produce batches and batches of vials for treatment, a completely different new setup is needed, an outfit. So AstraZeneca had to come in and, of course, had scientists who were able to move seamlessly and understand what's going on with the basic research and the applied research, and then translate that recipe to be able to come up with those bigger batches. But those conversations have to happen, and they happen because those people with those capabilities exist. So that's what joins up that gap. So the manufacturing is very important, but increasingly it's two-pronged because we have to think about the entire pipeline because, as we just had, it's very much about doing the research that works for us. And that will come all the way from upstream, going down all the way to manufacturing. And so those capabilities are, have a very difficult, terminology. They are design and engineering and associated management capabilities, but effectively what they're those capabilities that play a direct role in adapting and modifying configurations for integration into products and service and processes. So here you're looking at turning that science into something that has impact. And it's very complex, involves a very complex learning process that requires much attention. And yeah, that is just summarizing what they are. I thought it was useful to say, when I say design, I'm really talking about being able to come up with that sort of specification that is needed. And then when we talk about engineering, it's not engineering in terms of simply mechanical engineering or bioengineering. It's really about then turning all that into something that can actually be used, put on shelves, and used by populations. Now, we know very well that within universities, there are lots of disciplines, and increasingly it's understood that it's very much about multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, and there are still silos. It's not just about biological sciences or natural sciences and chemistry and so on. It's very much about arts and humanities and sort of working together to understand how impact can be achieved. But the real discussion now needs to be about how that conversation can happen within industry. Thank you. Because technology-driven trends have everything to do with industry and university research networks. And just moving on, I thought it was useful to point out that Oxford got a very generous donation about a year ago to set up a humanities center. And one of the reasons is because if AI is to be of benefit to humanity, we must understand its moral and ethical implications. So in other words, the emphasis here is that even philosophy that may sound very abstract has everything to do with the bioeconomy and biosciences. Now, I only have a minute or so, but I think this slide is very important because I wanted to remind us that in Africa, we have been collaborating and engaging in this space for a very long time, about 2,000 years. And there was a university that was founded in the 9th century and by a woman. And actually, the model of how they taught there is what universities such as Oxford and Cambridge, the tutoring system that is thought to be very effective, came actually from Africa. And so we see that this university was set up before Oxford and even Bologna, but also, the idea of creating collaboration within science, as we saw with the Royal Society, is something that cannot be overstated. Now, in my 60 seconds, I don't know whether I'll have any time at all to tell you what I do. I thought I might, but I'm wondering whether, yes, okay, I've been given 1 more minute. So I work at the Africa Oxford Initiative, and I'm going to tell you very quickly what we do there. There's a number of things we do, but I'm going to focus, in the interest of time, on one of the aspects that I work on. So we set up a platform called the Africa Oxford Health Innovation Platform that focuses on innovation and works with African innovators. So these are people who are usually postdoctoral and above, who are able to use robust science to come up with innovations and so on. And we take them through a process that is very much about looking at challenges from a multidimensional perspective, and also very conscious of the fact that health challenges will not be solved by software alone. So we know that there's a lot of buzz in some countries like Kenya about fintech and all the rest of it, and that's very important because it creates the infrastructure. But we must not forget there are other things such as devices, vaccines, and therapeutics that must be thought about, and a lot of innovation is required there. And then it's very much about co-creation. Oxford is not involved because it has the monopoly of geniuses. There are geniuses spread even across the world. So the group that we have that comes together also contributes amongst themselves and co-creates knowledge because they have specific context knowledge and specific knowledge about other things that they're able to share between countries and move the agenda of innovation forward in health. And then finally, the solutions they're obviously working on, because they're based in Africa, are African-led solutions. And learning remains very fundamental, so I'm not going to overegg that. This is to tell you, so this is the first cohort that we had. And actually today, at this bioconference, there's Stephen and Cornelius, and they'll be in the pitch startup competition, so you might get a chance to have a chat with them. And then I'm going to say something very quick here about how innovation is funded. And, technically, we're talking about venture capital. They have their own ways of going about raising money. It's 5 to 7 years. It might work very well for specific sectors like fintech and so on, and that is very important, but it's possibly not what would work best in the sort of innovation we are trying to engage with because of the quick turnaround. Patient capital is needed, so we probably really need to rethink the funding model. And normally with venture capital, the excitement is about coming up with that hockey stick. And the way they fund innovation means that then, as I pointed out, you end up with fintech, e-commerce, and all other areas that do not require patient capital because they have a quick turnaround. So whilst this is very exciting to see that there's been a massive change over a very short period of time, although concentrated in a few countries, there's much more to be done. And I'm going to stop there before I run into trouble.
You know, they say you give a woman a minute and she gives you a lifetime of information and so forth. So thank you so much for putting, I would say, a lifetime of knowledge into a few moments of speaking. Time to impact. Can we move it up, guys? Can we get it moving? I think that yesterday the historians that we had, Sia and Somi and Bhutan were talking about the history back 10, 20 years ago and how we were today based on discussions that happened 20 years ago. I think that from today's Bio-Africa, can we get things done within months, not years of effort? And I think that's what we're learning, and the importance of setting your own agenda and funding that agenda that you say is important. So now I think for the last couple of speakers, you've been listening to different professors, different researchers, our Tia, chairperson of the board. Now we're moving into speaking about people, public servants. I tell you I'm a doctor, but I'm a public servant. That's what I am. I'm so proud to be a public servant in the government of South Africa. And for me, I was just saying to this morning that when I first joined government over 12 years ago, my first minister was a woman. This is Minister DePaul Peters. And then my first director general was a female. And then even coming to the DSI, from going from Department of Energy to the Department of Science and Innovation, my then minister, Naledi Pandya, was a minister. So for me, I've always been shaped, formed, and inspired by the leadership of women that we have in our government. So for me, I'm going to introduce Dr. Pumzile Nlabo Nkwicha. I apologize for announcing your name wrong. She's the former United Nations Undersecretary General and Executive Director of the UN Women. She's also the current Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, who you have seen has been coming up the ranks. I think they're the #2 university in South Africa, right behind UCT in the last numbers. She's also a member of the first South African democratically elected parliament in 1994. First as a Deputy Minister of Department of Trade and Industry from 1994 to 1996, and as a Minister of Minerals and Energy from 1999 to 2006. When I first came to South Africa in 1999, my husband's grandmother, she did not have electricity in her house in the village. But when I came back in 2006, she had electricity in her household. So you can tell as a Minister of Minerals and Energy, electrification was one of the key programs of that department. She delivered. I could feel the delivery in my family and so forth. So thank you so much. I no longer had to cook over the stove outside. I could cook inside the house. So thank you for that. And then based on that, she later became the Deputy President of South Africa from 2005 to 2008. So she's the highest ranking female political leader in the history of the country, guys. Can we put some hands together for our new speaker?
Thank you very much, Madam Director, and thank you for inviting me, and congratulations to the team for organizing this conference, and congratulations to my fellow panelists. I've learned so much from the presentations that you have made. I mean, I have a relatively short contribution this morning. The big one really is for us to present the people who will be receiving the Dr. Konji Sebati Fellowship, which I am excited about. We are also ending Women's Month, celebrating the resilience of women and the milestones women have reached. It's been wonderful to see the numbers of women who have graduated from universities, who are doing amazing and cool things in different parts of the continent and the world. In some cases, we are at least saddened when you don't always see women in the high positions that we think they deserve to be in. So there's a fight there to make sure that as more women graduate, we see more women in leadership. It's also been wonderful to see what has happened since the Beijing Declaration in 1995, the increase on the number of girls who are in schools. Many countries did reach gender parity in terms of school attendance, but also frustrating that we've seen so many girls drop out of school, and COVID was the last straw. The number of girls that we lost who became pregnant, and of course the ones who did not return to school. When we were in Beijing in 1995, it was the African women who fought for the girl child, who argued that a boy and a girl have a different lived experience. So we need to profile the girl as a girl child, not just as a child, because it is girls who are forced to marry old people because they are girls. It is girls who experience FGM, female genital mutilation, because they are girls. At that time, it was girls who were dropping out of school in large numbers because parents in some parts of the continent preferred to educate boys. And of course, nutrition was also a problem because in some families, when food was scarce, the food went to everybody and the girl was the last one to receive food. So it's been good that the AU and other institutions have been behind a program that has challenged this stereotype that oppress girls. But we are not where we're supposed to be. We have to continue to fight for all the children, but also to pay attention to the issue of the girls. We're particularly worried about the increase of gender-based violence, the increase in human trafficking, which affects girls in particular. And all of these social issues actually need innovation. When we think about innovation, yes, we have to address produce products. We have to create systems, but we really have to be innovative about how we are solving these social problems. I do want to congratulate the colleagues who are here for the work that they are doing, and say it is important that in the work that you do, please think about how we can also address the impact that these different unacceptable challenges, how it impacts on girls. When we then recognize the people we are recognizing today who will get the fellowship, it means that Dr. Konji Sebati did not pass on, she multiplied. Because in the people that we are awarding these fellowships, we hope that we continue the work of many people who have walked this road. Innovation does lead to disruption, which we welcome. It does lead to scaling up, which is important. It does lead to lowering entry barriers, especially for entrepreneurs, but also it just redefines our life as it accumulates in different areas where it takes place. At this point, we are at a crossroads because of the many changes that we are seeing in the world. And for us to be able to solve these problems and challenges that we anticipate, there definitely will have to be significant innovation that we have to see. If we think about climate change and the extreme weather that will visit us in our communities, there's a lot that has to change so that we can cope with the impacts of climate change. If we think about food insecurity that we anticipate and the new crops we have to grow, the changes that have to be there in the way in which we manage agriculture, there too we need innovation. Our health needs, which I'm sure you know a lot about, we need innovation. And of course, the changes in technology, which will change the way we all live. Some of it is already upon us. Our future of work is also going to be affected by the changing in technology. If we think of where we are with the fourth industrial revolution and what comes after that, it is clear that our education may not be as equipped for the challenges that we are anticipating. As Africans, we have missed out a lot in the previous industrial revolution. In the first revolution, which was dependent a lot on the steam engine, we got colonization. We were victims in that industrial revolution. In the second industrial revolution, which was driven by electricity, we were just workers. We participated in pushing and caring, but we never really influenced and shaped that industrial revolution, and that has had a significant impact on our trajectory for development. In the third industrial revolution, which was full of automation, computing, globalization, we were there, but in a relatively small scale. That was the time when we saw the emergence of the Asian tigers who took advantage of the changes that came through. So the fourth industrial revolution, we really have to up the game. And I think it's going to be the innovation that you are bringing to the table that is going to help us to move forward. I think you are fit and proper for this revolution. I think amongst you, we have people who have the skills that we require in our country. But we also have to look at how we can then scale up these access to these skills so that many, many more people can have access. I just want to, as I end, to just share with you something that explains where we are and what the concerns are about our situation. It is funny, but I think it's important to...
Hi, is this Pizza Hut?
No, sir, it's Google Pizza.
Oh, sorry, I must have dialed the wrong number.
No, sir, Google bought Pizza Hut last month.
Okay, I'd like to order a pizza then.
Do you want your usual?
My usual? Do you know me?
According to our database, the last 12 times you called, you ordered an extra large pizza with 3 cheeses, sausage, pepperoni, mushrooms, and meatballs on a thick crust.
Super. Yeah, that's what I want.
May I suggest that this time you order a vegetarian pizza with sun-dried tomatoes on a whole wheat gluten-free crust?
Shit, no. I don't want a vegetarian pizza. It sucks. It's too healthy.
Your cholesterol is no good.
How in the hell did you know that?
We cross-referenced your home phone number with your medical records. We have the results of your blood tests for the last 7 years.
Well, either way, I don't want your goddamn vegetarian pizza. I take medication for the cholesterol problem.
Excuse me, sir, but you have not taken your medication regularly. According to our database, you purchased only a box of 30 tablets once at Superfarm Pharmacy 4 months ago.
I bought more from another pharmacy.
That doesn't show on your credit card statement.
Well, I paid in cash, that's why.
But you did not withdraw enough cash according to your bank statement.
Jesus Christ, I have other sources of money.
That doesn't show on your latest tax returns, unless you bought them using an undeclared income source, which is illegal.
What the hell? Somehow you have my tax records? This is nuts!
I'm sorry, sir. We use such information only with the sole intention of helping you.
I'm sick and tired of Google and Twitter and WhatsApp and all that shit. I'm going to a desert island where I don't have to deal with any of that shit.
I understand, but you need to...
So, before we all move to the desert island, I think let's innovate so that we can live up to the challenges that are facing us. Thank you. So we will ask the follows, and Madam Moderator will call the names, and congratulations.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for your speech. Now I figure out, when I introduced, you recall she's the Chancellor of UJ, so now I'm understanding why UJ is top in the 4th Industrial Revolution, because of their Chancellor. So she's bringing new information into today's forum. It's bioeconomy, but she's bringing 4 hours. So thank you so much for your speech. Can we get another round of applause before we go further? Okay. So, like I said, today we've spoken to you've heard from women who are, I would say, luminaries. They're giants and leaders into their field. But now we're bringing forward the youth, the ones who are going to be coming after, to continue to hold the baton and take it forward. So we have 3 women we're bringing forward. I'm not sure if the photographer is coming forward as well, so we can take pictures on stage. So we have a fellowship program. So the Africa Bio, there's the Ambassador Dr. Konji Sabati Fellowship Program. And what we've done is we're profiling women, future leaders in the biotech sector. I'm going to read about all of their bios, and I've read about these bios, and even though we're talking about youth or young ladies, to me it sounds like I'm reading the biography of people who are already giants in their sector. So this is so exciting for me. So I'm going to call Ms. Zara Pindella, Malindi. She's a PhD candidate in biomedical sciences at UJ, where her research in nanobiotechnology focuses on the development of recombinant antibody conjugated nanoparticles for targeted photodynamic therapy of cancer. She has a strong interest in translational medicine as defined by the 3 pillars of benchtop, bedside, and community, and hopes to use her interdisciplinary training to contribute to the advancement of Africa-centric biotechnology solutions to bridge the gaps between researchers, clinicians, and the community. Some of her key interests in the promotion of science outside of academia are science communication and science teaching. Having worked in both areas, she hopes to incorporate these into her efforts to increase science awareness, community engagement, to uplift our biotech industry, bioeconomy, and people. Ms. Zara Pindella, could you please come forward? I see the photographer. Could you come forward and take a picture with Joyce? Would you like to say a few words?
Oh, gosh. Hi, morning everyone. I'll keep it brief, I know we're time pressed. I just wanted to say, obviously, a huge thanks to Africa Bio for this amazing opportunity. And to the point, having heard a couple of the speakers last night talk about Dr. Konje Sabati, it's very clear the kind of impact that she's had in advancing the South African biotech industry and how much she promoted the importance of creating solutions for Africans by Africans. And hopefully I'll learn a lot through this fellowship and do work that would have made her proud. Thank you.
Now I'm calling for Ms. Retumetse Kodudumo. She's a graduate chemical engineering student and budding social entrepreneur who is passionate about combining scientific insights, indigenous knowledge systems, and social awareness to achieve sustainable development in under-resourced areas. She is the founder and director of Kwela Brews, a company which provides manufacturing, quality control, and distribution support to home brewers of traditional African beer, thus enabling them to operate safely, efficiently, and profitably. She's also pursuing her master's in engineering at Stellenbosch University. Her research is focused on identifying antioxidant compounds produced by bacterial endophytes from indigenous medicinal plants. Ms. Retumetse Kodumo, please come forward. Just a few words.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm deeply grateful for this opportunity to be part of the first cohort of Dr. Konje Sabati. And yes, the whole time in the interviews, I kept saying, wow, I have so much in common with her because I love jazz. And I read that in an article somewhere as I was reading up about her. But I am very grateful for the talks that we had today that really focused on under-resourced women. And it's important that we acknowledge that the bioeconomy already exists in Africa in the under-resourced communities, and we need to include that in this space. And so I hope I can make that contribution as part of this program. Thanks.
And last but not least, our last fellowship beneficiary is Ms. Belinda Madope. Over 3 years of experience is working as a quality science specialist in manufacturing. She's currently a regulatory specialist at the Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe, assessing the quality, safety, and efficacy of small molecule drugs, biologics, biosimilars, complementary medicines, blood, and blood products. She's passionate about bringing the benefits of biotechnology home, supporting indigenous bioinnovations, and supporting the product development cycle for promising and active African pharmaceutical players. Belinda, could you please come forward?
I have so many things to say, but I'm super grateful. I'm very grateful and deeply honored to have been selected to carry the work and the mandate that Ambassador Dr. Konje Sabati was carrying forward. She's still with us, within us, to carry forward and push the mandate of biotechnology in Africa by Africans for Africa. And I hope that I can make the contributions that increase the impact and access of Africans, these innovations that we want to bring home. Thank you very much.
So now our morning session has come to an end. We're over by 6 minutes, so I apologize in advance as a chair. But I'd like to say, just so thankful to the speakers on the panel, also the words of encouragement by our fellowship winners, and thank you so much for your time and attention for the last hour, since 8:30 this morning. So now we're coming to an end, but before we leave, I just have a few announcements for you. I regret to inform you that the mayoral dinner that was in the program is no longer taking place tonight. Instead, delegates are invited to the Bio-Africa dinner party, which will be held at the Circus Beach Cafe. So that, in terms of the event at the Circus Beach Cafe, delegates, we're really asking that you start coming from around 18:30 tonight or 6:30 p.m. tonight. And you need to have your delegate passes to get in. So, the 6:30 tonight at the Circus Beach Cafe. For students that are in attendance today, your catering will be elsewhere, likely the unusual or normal rooftop restaurants. And then the student chapter coordinator, Dr. Tandani Sabola from Africa Bio, will be the person you should contact around this. And then all other chapters, such as the startups, will be advised by their coordinators. So I'd like to say thank you so much for your time and attention. Look forward to seeing you towards the end of towards the other events in the conference. Thank you so much.